After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and said, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." Verse 10. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Please repeat with me our reason for being. We exist to introduce people to a greater leader, a greater way, and a greater life. You may be seated.
We were distinguished men. We were kings, educated men, known for studying the stars. Many of you all even believe that we engaged in pagan worship. And there is some truth to that. But there's also some truth to the fact that we saw a star like we've never seen before in our lives. This was the greatest phenomenon that we had ever seen. We understood at that moment that something that we had never seen was happening in a faraway place. We set out to go and find out what was happening there. We believed that the King of the Jews was to be born there. When we set out on that journey, we didn't know that it was going to take us 2 years to get there. But we knew that we had to make it to the spot that this star was leading us to. We came to this place called Jerusalem. When we entered Jerusalem, we began to inquire the people there, where can we find this King of the Jews? Where is the King of the Jews to be born? This other king named Herod told us the King of the Jews is to be born in Bethlehem of Judea. We immediately left and we followed the star until it rested over the place where Jesus was to be born. And when we walked into the house, there we saw Jesus and his mother Mary. Oh, we were so amazed. We were so amazed that we began to bow down before Jesus and we began to worship him. We began to show him how much he was worthy. And as we looked at him, we realized that the reason why we knew how to worship a king is because we were kings ourselves, because in the presence of a king, you always gave full body worship. In the presence of a king, you always submitted and recognized his authority. And in the presence of a king, you never came without your best gift. We understood this. This is why we brought the gift of gold. Gold represented Jesus' kingship. It represented the fact that he was royalty. He was not just a king, but he was a king of kings. May I remind you that we were kings ourselves, so this made him the king of kings because he was royalty to us. This was the King of Kings. We also gave him gold because this represented purity. You see, gold had to be purified through fire. It was placed in what is called a crucible. And in that crucible, the heat is turned up so much that the gold turns to liquid. And when it turns to liquid, what is called dross raises to the top. And this was the impurities that was found in the gold. And see, when Jesus came into this world, he came in a crucible. called a human body. And in that human body, the heat was turned up on Jesus. But the difference between you and Jesus is that there was no impurities found in Jesus when the heat was turned up on his humanity. This had to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. This gold represented his purity. Not only that, but this gold also represented our submission to his authority. Because gold was not easy to come by, y'all. We just couldn't go to Macy's and buy some gold. But we had to mine for this gold, which meant that we had to get dirty, because you had to dig underground in order to find the gold. You had to sift for the gold. So we didn't have the tools that we have now. We were willing to get dirty in order to worship this king. This was an act of submission for us. We understood that our money was not worth more than our master. This gold was about submission for us. This gold also represented the biggest exchange that was to happen for humanity. You know, gold was used much like money is now. You exchange gold for food, gold for clothing. But get this, Jesus exchanged his life for our filthy rags. Jesus exchanged his royalty for our wretchedness. See, this represented the biggest exchange that was to happen in all mankind. Jesus, through this gold, was showing us how to really worship him with our lives. This gold was really worth more than gold to us. Not only that, we found out that through this gold, that we were given the best kind of worship that we could give to God. It was our first act of worship. We gave gold before we gave anything else. When we gave this gold, we were saying, God, we don't have to understand all of the facts in order to exercise some faith. When we gave Jesus this gold, my question for you today is, what will your first act of worship be? You may be like we were at one time. We had to see a miracle in order for us to get the message. But what we didn't realize is that the greatest miracle was God working through something that we were familiar with. See, we were familiar with the stars. We had been studying them and worshiping them for so long, so we were familiar with the stars. So that's the reason why he was able to get our attention, and the reason why we were willing to follow the star. And for you today, you may be familiar with the person who invited you to come here today. You may be familiar with your mother's voice. You may be familiar with your friend that called you. You may be familiar with the radio station that you heard us broadcasting on. God works through the familiar to get us to do the things that cause him joy. He also worked through the unfamiliar, because this star that we saw was different than any star that we had ever seen in our lives. And we couldn't tell you why on the inside we felt like worshiping him. We couldn't tell you why on the inside we wanted to come to him. All we know is that we were drawn to him. He drew us to himself through a familiar means, but he also used an unfamiliar way. And God is telling someone here today that through his spirit, he's saying, look, you have that stirring going on that you've never felt before, because I'm doing unfamiliar but something familiar at the same time. So I ask you again today, what will your first act of worship be? You see, we were sinners, idol worshipers, but we were also called wise men. And the reason why we were called wise men is because we gave Jesus our gold before we ever called Jesus our God.
We gave incense. Why incense, you may ask? Well, back then, incense was used by priests and people in times of worship of a god. used in times of worship of a God. And what we want to make sure, because when you come in the presence of royalty or a God, you just didn't want to come there any kind of way. You want to make sure that you created an atmosphere or an aroma of reverence. And so you will come giving him aromatic worship. And so incense was used to create a fragrance of fellowship for the one that you wanted to worship. Now, I can't say as Magi, when we first saw Jesus' star, when we embarked on this journey to find him, and when we decided the gifts that we were going to give, that we fully understood who he was. But we did understand that he had to be someone of great significance, because his birth had been prophesied and anticipated for many years. I can't say as Magi, men not part of the Jewish nation, men outside or what could be considered outside of the family of God, that we fully understood the deity of Jesus' personhood. Okay. That he was God in the flesh, God among us. But we did understand that his purpose had to be connected to the divine. Because who else, when they're born, gets a star that acts like an ancient GPS system, guiding us step by step to his doorstep of his house, unless God was involved some kind of way? No, we didn't fully understand who Jesus was, but we came and gave him our best worship anyway. We gave him incense. We gave him aromatic worship. Aromatic worship that was scented with the sweet smell of sacrifice. Look at y'all, we traveled a long way through treacherous terrain and torrential rain. We traveled a long way to see this Jesus. Aromatic worship that was perfumed with praise. We spoke words of affection to Jesus when we got there. Aromatic worship that created an aroma, adoration. We bow before Jesus. Now, I can't say we fully understood who Jesus was, but I'm sure glad when we came, that we came prepared to give him some praise anyway. It's while we was giving him aromatic worship is that we began to really understand who he really was, and who he really is, that he's God. He's God. And maybe that's someone in the room. Maybe that's your story on today. Maybe you came here, you don't fully understand who Jesus is. But just like us, you came in here with your own incense. You came here to give Jesus your own aromatic worship today. And your worship is scented with the sweet smell of sacrifice. You got up this morning out of your bed, traveled to church over terrestrial terrains and torrential rains, just so you can see Jesus in his house. Maybe that's you, that your worship is filled with perfume, with praise, because you all joined together and you began to sing songs to Jesus that was filled with sweet words of affection to him. And maybe some of you created an aroma of adoration. You lifted hands, holy hands to God, and you bowed before him. No, maybe you didn't really understand who Jesus is when you came in here, when you came to this place. But aren't you sure glad that you came to give him some praise anyway? Because while you was giving him praise, while you was worshiping, you discovered who Jesus really is. Oh, you might have come in here, you didn't have a clear picture of Jesus, but as you begin to worship him, you begin to recognize that he was a deliverer. You found out that Jesus will fight your battles for you. No matter the challenges that you face in life, you realize that Jesus is the one that's fighting your battles. You recognize that the battle is not yours, but it's the Lord's. You discovered that in worship. While you came, you might not have fully understood that Jesus, who had a less than 20/20 vision of who Jesus is. But as you begin to continue to worship him, you recognize and you realize that he is a healer. Whatever you recognize that Jesus can fix your broken heart. And so whatever your hurt habits or hang-ups are, you as you begin to worship Jesus, you begin to realize that he's a doctor that never lost a case, that he is the great physician. Oh, you might have come in here, you just didn't really recognize, really understood all the deity of Jesus. But as you begin to worship him, you begin to realize that Jesus is a keeper. You recognize that Jesus is sovereign over every situation in life. So no matter the experience, or no matter the tragedies that you experience in life, no matter the tragedies that you may even see on your televisions, you recognize that Jesus is a God who cares and a God who knows about all your troubles. But not only does he know and he cares, but you know that God is competent to help you, to keep you through it. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. I'm just trying to let you know that he's a God that'll keep you. He has the sovereign strength to sustain you through any situation. No, you might not have known who God or Jesus was when you fully came in here. But aren't you glad you gave him praise anyway? Because as you gave him praise, you began to recognize who he really was. Who he really was. Now, I see that some of you get a little bit excited about giving Jesus some aromatic worship. And you got to excuse me if I get a little bit out of myself. I'm a magi and not a Pharisee. So I tend to get a little bit animated in my aromatic worship. But what I realized as a magi is that I discovered that not everyone is excited and eager to give Jesus worship. So everybody says, King Herod at that time was the current reigning illegitimate king of the Jews. And so when we came approaching him about where's the one who was born king of the Jews, let's just say his spirit was just a little bit disturbed. His spirit was just a little bit disturbed. And even though Herod gathered his leadership team together and discovered where the Messiah will be born, and even though he had a meeting with us and talked to us about and told us to go find the child, and when we find him, come back to him and let him know where the child is at so he can go and worship, we discovered that Herod really wasn't that serious about worshiping Jesus. In fact, Herod he didn't want to go and worship Jesus. He wanted to go and wage war against Jesus. It was later revealed to us that Herod, the illegitimate king of the Jews, wanted Jesus, the one who was born king of the Jews, killed. So instead of him seeing that Jesus came as a triumph for God's people, he saw Jesus as a threat to himself. Therefore, he wanted him murdered. That's what he wanted to murder. And so what we learned is that it's hard for an illegitimate king to give Aramaic worship to the real king. Because it requires him to relinquish the title to his throne. And so Herod had a hard time giving Jesus aromatic worship. He had a hard time getting worship. He had a hard time handing over the keys to the kingdom. He had a hard time. He had a hard time giving up the position of being number one. Herod saw Jesus as a threat to his throne instead of seeing Jesus as one who came to give the people a triumphant life. And after all, the people had been waiting for this Jesus to come and do that. And friends, I want to encourage you. Don't be like Herod. Don't be like Herod. As a magi, I want to encourage you. This is what I see that keeps people from giving Jesus the aromatic worship he deserves. Don't be like Herod and see Jesus as a threat to your life. No, see Jesus as the one who came to give you a triumphant life. Don't be like Herod, an illegitimate king of your life, afraid to turn over the keys to the kingdom. Don't be like Herod, an illegitimate king of your life, afraid to turn over the title to the throne. Don't be like Herod, an illegitimate king of your life, afraid to give up the position of being number one in your life. Let Jesus be the number one in your life. Give Jesus the keys to your life. We came giving Jesus our best gifts of worship. Even though we were unbelievers, even though we didn't fully understand who he was, we gave him aromatic worship. But what we realized is that even though we had thought we had given Jesus our best worship we had, we came to understand that the God of the universe, the God who created the stars that we had been studying, that led us to the spot, that he had already given us the greatest gift that he had. You see, God gave us the present of his presence in his son, Jesus Christ. We gave incense. God gave himself.